Where's Nash?
Love
Nash
it.
may have joined as a.
He asked, how do I video?
He must have joined as a viewer and not a panelist.
Yes, he did. I'm going to move him over now.
So I also see other staff members as attendees. Are they supposed to be participant or panelists too?
No, not the ones that are on the other side.
Okay.
Did Michael come over?
Yep.
There he is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome to tonight's study session. We have 2 items on the agenda, and the first is a discussion regarding the solar installation projects in connection with the water reclamation facility and the water treatment plant. And I believe Mr. Pyle is giving that presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Norman City Council. A concept from a resolution adopted by the city of Norman establishing goals for Ready for 100. We didn't get a lot of chance to jump in and make progress on the possibilities to get us to that goal during the pandemic. We did make some small steps as part of an effort that Mr. Ken Comiskey teed up for us just prior to his retirement. And he wound up with an opportunity to either invest $80,000 in an environmentally advantageous manner or write the check back to the Department of Environmental Quality. So we obviously chose to spend the money on an environmentally friendly task here at the city of Norman. About that time, I had participated in my first workshop through the Oklahoma Municipal League regarding the C-PACE program, and that is a property-based financing tool for commercial property owners in the state of Oklahoma to make energy upgrades and improvements to their commercial property. That is one of the goals, and I think it's on page 4 of the mayor's 2018 strategy for implementing the Ready for 100 agenda. When I saw the PACE program, I reached back into my Rolodex and I made contact with a gentleman named Michael Chapin, who is on the Zoom call with us this evening. I met Mr. Chapin, 15 plus years ago in California during the rollout of the PACE program in the San Joaquin Valley. And Mr. Chapin and I, as part of a 60 city joint powers authority, developed and financed and put on the ground, 60 to 90 megawatts of electricity in various forms and energy upgrades for residential, commercial, and industrial customers. Touched base with Mr. Chapin, asked him to take a peek at the Oklahoma C-PACE program. And while we were having that conversation, we met with Mr. Comiskey about the $80,000 initial solar project that we undertook, and council awarded a contract for us to get that work done. I asked Mr. Chapin not to leave the task immediately and to work with me to come up with additional solar installation opportunities at 2 of our largest energy consuming facilities, the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. Both operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Both consume an awful lot of electricity, and knowing the challenges that we recognize in the Oklahoma energy market, in that we have the cheapest electricity in the United States, I asked Michael to help us develop what the plan would look like for 2 solar installations, one at the water treatment plant, one at the wastewater treatment plant. And Mr. Chapin has taken that task on and is prepared to report back what our opportunity looks like. And we have an opportunity to advance these two projects in relatively short order. I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Chapin of Conor Energy, and Mr. Chapin will take us through a slide presentation on what he has been able to come up with for us. Oh, you're on mute.
See here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you for that introduction there, Daryl. Appreciate it. And again, good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and thank you for giving us this time this evening to share this presentation here with you. I'll slip over here to a slide share and pull this up. And are you able to see the slides? Okay, fantastic. Again, this presentation that we'll be sharing with you this evening, this is really the culmination of several months of working with city leadership, Daryl Pyle, Chris Mattingly, Steve Hardman, having us come out to the sites, take us around, look at the switchgear facilities, pulling energy bills from these facilities. So a lot of city energy and help was crafted into what you're going to see this evening on this presentation here for developing clean renewable energy for the offsetting of the water and wastewater treatment facilities. I am joined this evening here tonight by Andy Stankati. We were hoping to have one other person, David Smart, here from Biostar Renewables, join us as well. I believe his wife is in labor, so he is not joining us on this call. So let's see here. So if you'd like, I'll pause here a second and let introduce Andy Stankati from Biostar Renewables, just kind of share a little bit about Biostar, and I'll share a little bit about Conor Energy, and we can then dive right in.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And very nice to meet everyone, and very excited about this opportunity, and happy to be here today. Biostar Renewables is a renewable energy developer based out of Kansas City. We focus on all sorts of energy projects, but one of our main focuses is solar installations. And we do that in various facets, from construction contracts, EPC agreements, to turnkey development of projects where we finance and own and operate. We have over 2 gigawatts of experience on our team, from estimating to construction and finance and ownership of projects. So those projects, as you can see in this list here, range from California to New Jersey, kind of all over the United States, with various types of off-takers, from municipalities to commercial and industrial customers throughout the country from varying sizes. We're very excited about this opportunity and hope to be able to provide a very cost-effective solution for you guys, as you can see further in the proposal here, and look forward to any other questions that might be able to be answered.
Great, thank you, Andy. And again, I'll just wanted to point out here, this one slide in particular, we've got a picture here of Norman's First. This is, as Daryl had mentioned earlier, that those funds that were used instead of paying out the environmental fees, we were able to install, this is about a 30 kW system. It was installed here locally by Solar Power of Oklahoma. They've reached out and expressed an interest in either working collaboratively. So we'll be in touch with them and either accept a project proposal or working collaboratively, either one there with Solar Power of Oklahoma. But this is Norman's first taste. That system size there is about 30 kW in size. Just to kind of give for reference, the project proposal tonight is 2,270 kW. So it's about 75 times the size of what we're seeing there, that 30 kW system size right there. So, let me share with you, tell you quickly, Conor Energy, I've been involved in energy over the past 20 years, and as Daryl mentioned, developing energy solutions, whether they're solar photovoltaic or energy programs. One of our key programs, as Daryl mentioned, the Fig Tree PACE program. We started with about 60 cities and counties across California, really pushing a C-PACE and commercial and residential PACE even. And we were able to expand that. Today, that program exists with over 200 agencies. And again, that really started with the Joint Powers Authority and some of Daryl's leadership with other cities to get that program kicked off the ground. So a lot of good work and energy leadership there. Gosh, that dates back to 2009 for some of that work there. So thanks again, Daryl. That good work is still in process today. Just to share with you what we're hoping to achieve with this solar array that's being proposed here at the water and the wastewater facility sites. The key environmental take here is that generating electricity from solar photovoltaic systems generates 0 greenhouse gas emissions. So by using power that's clean, renewable energy and developed on site, that's that much less energy that we're going to have to buy from the grid burning fossil fuels. So the biggest impact to take away is that these solar systems are definitely the right step in reducing our effects on climate change. Additionally, I'll share with you the energy savings, which is probably the funnest part, but it's also going to help be a long-term, stable, clean, renewable energy source for the next 25 years as a hedge against maybe some of the rising energy costs. And I'll touch on those on a later slide here as well. And ideally, this is the perfect opportunity to make good on a lot of the goals, sustainability goals that we have set forth for an inside of Norman 100, Ready for 100. So again, being able to tackle on this much amount of renewable energy is definitely a big critical component of being able to meet and exceed that Ready for 100 goal. So to kind of walk you through what we did to develop this system, we analyzed over 50 different accounts. So if you can imagine, the water and wastewater systems don't just have one utility meter, they've got over 50. We've kind of weeded those down and looked at and identified 7 potential candidate meters that could be utilized and offset with clean renewable energy from on-site solar. And in looking at those 7 accounts, that is how we're designing this particular system. And we'll be doing that under a net metering structure. So just to share with you how net metering works, in case somebody's not as familiar, essentially think of it as where we are installing this renewable energy solar PV. As it's producing electricity, think of it as spinning the meter backwards. And you're getting credit for every kilowatt hour you generate. And when the sun goes down and there's no more sunlight, essentially you're buying power from the grid, and you're buying that power and the meter spinning forward because you're consuming power from the grid. At the end of the month, they're going to tally up how much you used versus how much you produced, and that's your net cost. That is net metering on a very simplistic basis. And that's the process for which we've analyzed and looked at how can we offset the most value for the water and wastewater systems. So with that in mind, the goals that we've really set forth is, can we deliver immediate energy savings from the solar arrays? Can we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions with this clean renewable energy and help meet long-term city sustainability goals? Local jobs and local preferences are always on our mind, and that's a big part of this program as well. Just to kind of walk you through, this is a visual representation of how the system is designed and laid out for the water and wastewater treatment facilities. So we are building 2 separate arrays, both in 2 locations, one at the water treatment plant and one at the water reclamation facility. The array that's situated for the water treatment plant is feeding into 2 meters. Both of those meters are going to be fed up to 300 kW in size. And that is a limit, just to share with you, that 300 kW limit is a utility limit of how much solar can be put in for net metering. And it is important to note and to share, all of this solar that's being proposed, none of this is going to change the way the plants operate and use power, meaning we're not asking the plants to shift from solar to the grid. The systems at the water treatment plant and the water reclamation facility will always be tied to the grid. And the redundant systems that exist with the diesel generators, those will stay in place. None of the redundant and backup systems are or will be affected from any of the solar. So easiest way to think of this is you're simply going to be buying less power from the utility and basically now allocating that much more green power than what you would have bought from the utility. Again, this is not a switch that we're switching off from the grid. All of the power is going to still be tied to the grid. So we're not simply taking them off the grid from the development of the solar arrays. Just to share with you, there's one array here that's tying into the water treatment plant. And I'll show you a visual here that we have as well, what that'll look like at the water treatment plant and then also at the water reclamation facility. Did want to point out this is not a mistake. We do have one of the meters at 500 kW instead of the 300 max limit. And that's just simply because that meter is large enough to take on more solar and without losing any value. So we were able to size one of them up to a 500 kW limit. To give you a nice aerial picture of what this looks like and to kind of where we're at, this is Bratcher Minor Road at the water reclamation facility off of Jenkins Avenue. This here is that existing 30 kW solar that you saw in the earlier slide. And this is approximately what the 1670 kW solar array. So this is feeding into the 5 meters, 4 of them at OG&E and 1 of them at OEC, which is the OEC meter that actually exists right over here on the Bratcher Minor Road. So this particular solar array is going to be designed to offset the power at the water reclamation facility. And again, unlike a large array, this is really 5 separate arrays just kind of bundled for economies of scale, built at one site, but feeding into 5 different meters. The aerial photo here of the water treatment plant, this is a 600 kW, essentially again, 2 300 kW arrays tied together, and these will be feeding across to the meter here at the water treatment plant, offsetting. And again, just for approximation, it's about almost 1,500 solar modules that's being shown here, and they'll all be basically ground-mounted fixed tilt. This is a slide here kind of giving you that environmental representation of what the impact is from this proposed solar array. So if you want to equate it to number of passenger vehicles driven off of a year, it's the same as taking over 500 cars off the road, off the air quality. That is the difference from using clean renewable energy from the panels as opposed to burning fossil fuels and using them that way. So here's just some simple analysis, whether it's gas consumed or waste averted. These are the greenhouse gas or CO2 equivalents from the EPA based on the design of this system. For the project cost and savings summary, I wanted to take a moment to kind of explain the biggest benefit I can tell you, in addition to the sustainability goals being reached, is that this project is using the annual cost of what we're already spending for power to finance the cost of the system. So in year 1, we have net savings of slightly over $40,000, $41,000, and over the cumulative over the 25-year period, it's 1.5 million. So to walk you through the project cost and savings analysis, we have a system cost of about 4.775 million. That is producing roughly 3.5 million kilowatt hours of energy or production. We've built in an annual escalator of what we expect energy rates to rise on an annual basis. We used OG&E's latest announcement. They have announced at about 7% increase over the next 5 years from OG&E, which equates to about 1.4%. So that is the number that we know, at least from the latest announcements from OG&E, of what the annual energy escalator is. And we'll show that effect on the savings analysis moving forward. One nice slide, I really like showing this here. This is, if we look at it from an annual basis, we're looking to offset approximately $272,000. This is the amount of money that the city of Norman is currently spending for those exact kilowatt hours. You can continue and look at that as an annual basis. I can either spend $272,000 and spend it to OG&E and OEC right now, as I am doing. That's the money that's being spent for this particular kilowatt hours for these 7 specific meters for this amount of energy production. So obviously we spend more than that at the water and wastewater plant, but just how much we're offsetting from this particular project. What we're looking to do is, if we took that same $272,000, we could build the solar array, and that's the $191,000, pay for operations and maintenance, and that's the $40,000 of annual operations and maintenance, and production and savings guarantees that come with the system. So this system also has 90% of its production guaranteed to the city for the development of the solar program. And then the delta, this is the $41,000 of savings that is coming back to the city on realized savings. So after building the system, covering the operations and maintenance, this is the $41,000 of annual savings for the same exact $272,000 that we are currently spending on our utility bills. If we look at how this looks over a period of 25 years, which is the power warranted system life, again, kind of taking the middle road here, which is what we're analyzing at 1.4% annual increase, we have about $1.5 million in savings. If energy rates over this next 25 years rises at an average, and there's at 3%, you'd see more savings over 3 million. And if it's less, you still would have approximately about $1 million in savings if you're about the 1% number. So just wanted to give that range of energy forecasting and what it will do to the savings numbers so that everyone has an idea if energy rates rise more or less than what's projected or what we know today at the 1.4%, that will affect obviously the value of savings, but we're still at about 1.5 conservatively today based on what we know at our 1.4%. And lastly, the timeline. What would it take to build this proposed solar array? Conservatively, we've built in about 18 months from start to finish. We hope to have it really done in about 12, but I think conservatively we have built in here about a schedule for up to 18 months. So assuming everything moves forward, we would have a project up and ready for ribbon cutting no later than July 2022. And and again, David Smart isn't joining us this evening, but I do have Andy Stancati here with Biostar and myself. Thank you so much for giving us this time to present this information, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Michael and David, appreciate that. Council, while the slides are up, if there's any question you might have, that'd be great. When we talk about what we forecast for the price of electricity over the next 25 years, as Michael was putting this presentation together, we were having conversations this week about what the impacts of Snowmageddon 2021 will have on energy costs going forward. The amount of infrastructure that was damaged from freezing temperatures all over the Midwest, those costs will eventually be recuperated through rates. I think 1.4% is what was projected off of the current rate case proposed by OG&E, but we will see energy costs increase because of damage incurred from that most recent Arctic event. So we're pretty comfortable with these projections. We think if it goes anywhere, our savings will increase. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Peacock.
Oh yeah, thanks. I was just curious if the 25-year time frame was also the payback time frame.
So the payback, if we go back over here to this slide, the good news about what we're doing here is we're taking the energy costs that you're spending on an annual basis. This 272, if we did no solar, you'd still spend 272,000 OG&E. All we're saying is let's reallocate those funds, put it towards a solar project, and you can actually bank that 41,000. So when you talk about payback, if you're getting that money back each year, 41,000, that's a payback of 0. You're getting savings immediately. You don't have to wait to get that money in 10 years and hopefully things get better. We're going to see results year 1. So that's what I was saying. This is an immediate savings based on what you're spending today on your current energy costs.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you.
The beauty of 2 projects like this, they are in our enterprise funds. So any dollar we save is a dollar we save our ratepayers. And we know, Norman, having the recognition of one of the few agencies that has to go get voter approval for a rate increase, our ability to save a dollar is very valuable from our perspective.
Councilmember Nash.
Hi, so looking at the 25-year benefits, what was the efficiency of solar panels 25 years ago? You know off the top of your head?
Yeah, Andy, this is a great question for you. I know that you dive into this, but we can go ahead if you want to break it down differently, but I'll be happy to chime in too.
Yeah, great question. And, I don't have the exact figure going back 25 years, but what I, can pretty easily reference, even just within the last 5 years, the typical solar panel, which is about 3.5 feet by about 5.5, 6 feet, was about a 300 watt panel just 5 years ago. And now the typical solar panel is about 450 watts. So it's already increased, over 50% in efficiency and of power per the same square footage, and actually for a cheaper price over that short amount of time period. The efficiency of solar panel cells themselves has also risen quite dramatically. Depending on the technology you're talking about, there's thin film, there's monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and several other types out there. But the efficiencies have also increased. If I had to put a number on it, I would guess at least 20 to 50%, somewhere in that range over the last 25 years. Because solar panels back then were much smaller, different cell structure and makeup chemically, and the technology has advanced a lot over that time period.
Okay, so it's pretty unlikely that the solar panels that we would install today would be the same ones that we would have 25 years from now, right?
Yep.
Okay. How much does it cost to replace those?
Depends
in terms
on
of like fraction of the installation. Is it, we're looking at 25% the cost of installation to replace those solar panels and they become outdated?
Yeah, let's see. That would be a fairly accurate number there, actually. For the materials and labor, about 25% is a pretty good estimate. Now, with solar panels, I think right now I've averaged about a 5% year over year decrease in price, and kind of solar installations in general have. Now I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, that will probably slow down as you hit certain inflection points. As labor can't really get too much cheaper, they find more efficient ways to install things. But at a certain point, you can't really get, you can't get less than zero. I'd say that's a good conservative estimate, that 25% of the cost would be repaid after 25 years.
And to Councilmember Nash's point, what we have seen in installations done 15 years ago, even though the panel production was still warranted for another 10 years, the efficiency gains made a business case to go ahead and do a new upgrade and not wait for the full 25-year run out. Now, those are happening less frequently because the newer panels have improved so dramatically, but it is a thing we would monitor annually. And if, 10, 12 years from now, the efficiencies have gained where we could demonstrate even greater savings by upgrading those panels sooner, we would bring you that business case. And we've seen it happen in the past.
Great point.
Okay, so we replace these twice, then it's adding about 50% of that cost on top of it. What about the lifespan of the other components, like the batteries? And let's say that solar panels don't improve at all from here out. How long do those last before we have to replace them just due to normal wear and tear?
Right. So the solar panels themselves have a product warranty of 12 years, but they have a linear power warranty, which means that they are guaranteed to produce over 80% of the expected power for 25 years. So for the full term of the system that we're proposing here. The other components of the system, inverters, racking, those are the other real main components. Monitoring as well, but that's a fairly minor cost. Inverters, we can buy up to a 25-year warranty to warrant them the entire term of the period, and kind of safeguard you from future equipment needs to replace those. That would still require some expenditures for labor to replace them, but the equipment itself could be covered for up to 25 years. The standard warranty in the industry is 10 years, but you can buy up to protect yourself against future exposure on equipment costs. And then as far as the racking material that goes with the installation, that will be warranted for 20 to 25 years, depending on vendor selection. But that is very standard kind of equipment and fairly off the shelf, steel that is rated for, galvanized steel that's rated for, long useful life and meant for being, in the ground. So very long lifetime of systems. Kind of to your point earlier about, going back 25 years ago, when they started installing installations back then, they were projecting that, systems would last 15, 20, 25 years. Now the average lifespan of what most installations are being installed now today are expected to last well beyond that, 25, 30, 35 years. Many appraisal values are actually based off of the 35-year lifespan of a system because the technology has gotten so good and has proven itself that these actually are usable assets well beyond even those initial warranty periods that most manufacturers provide.
Yeah, how do these things handle hail?
Very well. So there are hail studies done on the modules and sort of industry standard testing. I believe the test is completed at 60 mile-an-hour at golf ball size hail, at I think anything but a completely direct impact, which would be a pretty tough scenario to have happen, especially since the modules are at a 25-degree tilt. But hail pretty much bounces right off of them. And I think if there was any incidents where you could prove that it was less, of a hail or more of a hailstorm or less of a hailstorm than what was actually occurred out there, you could make a warranty claim for product failure. If you had pea-size hail and it cracked a module, that would be something we would cover under the warranty and go back to the manufacturer for product defect.
Yeah, golf ball size hail and 60 miles per hour isn't it's not an uncommon thing in this part of the country. So if these are damaged by the weather, you're saying there's a warranty that would cover its replacement?
Up to a certain point, but if it's an extreme weather event, then it's going to be more like a force majeure event or something that is not covered by a warranty. Not all natural events will be covered from damage. Our most like
recent low temperatures from Snowmageddon did not result in any long-term damage, other than they didn't produce much when they were covered in snow on the 30 kW installation at the water reclamation plant. So we've had that little live experiment with our first dabble into the solar arena, and I do check regularly the solar array that OEC installed on I-35, and so far it's seemed to manage the weather successfully. Anything's possible, but so far what we've seen, the solar installations have withstood.
Okay. So on the kind of the middle ground return on with our energy savings, looked like about 64,000 over the course of 25 years. What's the typical annual maintenance cost, and how many people have to be employed to maintain these things? Like, is that,
So there,
are these things going to cost $200,000 a year to maintain and staff, or do they pretty
no,
much run themselves?
yeah, they pretty much run themselves. And so we've included a $40,000 a year annual O&M cost. And that is to cover preventative maintenance visits, annual and monthly reporting, as well as daily monitoring to ensure the system is operating properly. So we come out once a year to do preventative maintenance checks and check the structural components of the system, the electrical components of the system, make sure everything is working properly. But in addition to that, we're constantly monitoring the system with alerts and alarms that trigger our crews to deploy resources based upon the alarm. You know, if there's a severity, 100% power outage, we are going to deploy somebody to get out there within 24 hours to go and check out why the system is not producing if we cannot remotely reset it ourselves, and have various levels of alarms along with that. And that is included in the $40,000 a year operations and maintenance costs. Outside of that, there may be additional costs incurred, but with good preventative maintenance and monitoring, these systems pretty much run themselves. And, you know, most of the issues are fixed with a simple power cycle, turning the power off to the system and turning it back on. And that clears a lot of the errors. You know, for the most part, they're pretty, you know, steady operators and do not require a ton of care and maintenance on a daily basis.
Just out of curiosity, what is the maximum amount of wind that these things can handle?
So they would be rated for the wind zones in the area based upon, you know, your guys' permitting guidelines. I believe it depends on the racking system that is used, as well as the footing, soil type, kind of all of the actual civil structural components play a factor into that.
I think Norman got a 90-mile-per-hour blowjob over the summer that, yeah, that's itself isn't outside of the realm of impossibility. It's not uncommon that we'll get gusts 75 miles per hour.
Yep. Yeah, so a system can easily take that on. Usually over 110 to 120 miles an hour is what the systems are rated for. But again, kind of depends on racking configuration and structural components. And, you know, basically the deeper we drive posts and the longer we make the post, the more structurally sound it can be, as well as the configuration of how many modules are on a row and how they're configured as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Peacock?
Yeah, this is a follow-up on one of Councilmember Nash's points. Is there any kind of property insurance policy that could go along with this? Is that even a scenario?
That's an interesting question. On all of our other city assets, we are self-insured, but to that point, is there a third-party insurance policy that we could buy, even if it took a portion of the savings, just to provide additional security against any unforeseen weather event?
Yeah, I mean, because to Councilmember Nash's point, yeah, the unforeseen weather event is becoming more of a common occurrence these days. I think, foreseen. Yeah, right. You know, hope for the best, plan for the worst, I think is a great motto in this scenario. Yep. Yeah, I'd personally love to see if that is an option or a possibility going forward, and what the premiums would look like on something like that.
We'll make some phone calls. Thank you.
That.
I am not seeing any other questions or comments, Mayor.
All right. Well, I am excited for that. I guess my one question would be to the city manager. How do we move forward? Let's do it.
Council took some action to provide us the delivery vehicle just in the last couple of months. We have some draft language that we are preparing for the city attorney's review. And we were hoping we'll have paperwork ready for your consideration on March 23rd's agenda. and these guys would be able to mobilize within days of that action.
Awesome. That is exciting. All right. Now we are on to item number 2, which is discussion regarding the engineering design criteria update, diagnostic report. And who is taking the lead on this one?
Sean is going to start it off, Mayor.
Okay.
Sean O'Leary.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Had to unmute myself there. This must be the night for technical topics. Lots of engineers on the line with us tonight, so thank you for the time. Just some brief remarks here as we kick it off. So we're going to talk to you about the EDC, Engineering Design Criteria, and GSI, so lots of acronyms here: green, stormwater infrastructure, standard specifications, construction details. These are all the sort of what I call the Bibles of our staff engineers here, and every city has these. And these are the design criteria and the construction standards for public infrastructure. And we're talking about all public infrastructure. So things like streets and bridges and water systems and sewer systems and sidewalks and you name it, lots of public infrastructure. So this is how we design and construct these things. Many of our criteria manuals are 25 years old, so they're in dire need of updates. And there's lots of other reasons to update them. I'll talk about that here in a moment. I want to say this is not a public works project. This involves multiple city departments. We generally have been the kind of the centerpiece of the manuals over the years, so we agreed to take this one on. But Chris Mattingly is here with us. The utilities department gets into lots and lots of very important public infrastructure with water and sewer and so on. Parks department does lots of public infrastructure. Every time we build a Norman Forward project, there is public infrastructure involved. So lots of us use these every day. They're very important and we need to update them. So this is also not a stormwater project, although stormwater is a main focus. And we're going to talk a lot about green infrastructure. That's a lot of what got us started on this last year. But again, it involves all infrastructure elements. We're not asking you to make any decisions tonight. We're not asking you to adopt anything. We really don't have anything for you to adopt yet. That comes next. So what we're going to share with you tonight is what we've been doing for about a year. Lots of stakeholder involvement, community involvement. We were trying to figure out kind of how bad is our system, how bad are the manuals, where do we need to put the focus, where are some of the interests from our community and our developers and engineers and architects and those who work with these. So there's a diagnostics report that we sent to you in advance of this meeting. Kind of a tough read, but lots of good technical information in there about that we've learned. So we're going to share that with you tonight. And then after tonight, we would like to go to phase 2 of this program. So next Tuesday on your agenda is an amendment to the engineering contract with this firm, who I'm going to introduce here in a moment, Friesen Nichols. And we'd like to move to phase 2, which is really the meat or the heavy lifting of this process. It's in phase 2 where we will have a great deal more community engagement in many, many forms, certainly with our development community, local engineers, architects, contractors, citizens, you name it, anyone that's interested in the topic. But the goal is to rewrite all of these manuals. This is some really heavy lifting. So these are things like green infrastructure standards that we don't have today. So there'll be some new things, but we also want to update the old things. Chris can tell stories. I can tell stories about some of our standards that just aren't up to date anymore. We need to bring them up to date with current materials, current technologies, that sort of thing. We also have some other programs that the council and the community have talked about for many years, like a complete streets policy. We spent over a year developing that, but it hasn't been adopted. So we want to put that in this program. PROAG, which is the accessibility guidelines for disabled citizens, that for the ADA, essentially, it's a new standard. We haven't adopted that yet. We want to incorporate that here. Renewable energy, like the last topic, is something that's kind of missing from our program. So what about streetlights? We have 9,000 streetlights in Norman. It's time to upgrade those, and we're doing that right now with OG&E. NOEC. Traffic impact analysis, things like that that you probably don't think a lot about, but you're reviewing these kinds of things every Tuesday when there's development projects or capital projects coming to you. So this is our chance to move to that, and we hope that you'll support that item next Tuesday night. But let me just introduce our team here. Dr. Carrie Evenson is our project manager. As you know, Carrie is our stormwater program manager, and that's her niche. But I selected Carrie for this to oversee this project because she's a great project and a program manager. She's probably the most organized person I know. And Carrie has headed up this effort over the last year. She's joined tonight with our Friesen Nichols staff leads, Trish Hatley and Keith Beatty. And I think Keith is going to do most of the talking. So it's my pleasure to introduce them. And I don't know if Carrie has any comments or if Keith is just going to jump right in. Thank you.
Yeah, Keith, I'll let you go ahead and jump right into it.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm going to try to make sure I get the right screen set up there. So hopefully you can just see the basic presentation. Is that what you see there? Great. I was doing something with Boy Scouts last night, and they were laughing at me because I had screens all messed up. So thank you very much. I don't think I can do a better job than Sean can do presenting this, but I'll do my best. Again, Sean said, I'm Keith Beatty. I'm with Friesen Nichols, and I'm the project manager that's headed up and worked with Carrie throughout this. As part of this, the project stemmed really from the city's desire to use green infrastructure during design. And so in order to promote and incentivize or just review plans submitted using GSI design techniques, there wasn't really a set of criteria and standards needed, or there really wasn't a set of standards. And so as part of that, additionally, the comprehensive transportation plan, which was adopted in 2014, included recommendations to update the EDC, the construction specifications, and adopt a complete streets policy, which Sean mentioned. But in 2017, the city council's goal was to incentivize green building codes, and the council, community planning and transportation committee wanted to explore the incentives programs for green infrastructure and low impact development, which we've done as part of this program. So the first step was to develop a diagnostic report to review the overall condition of the current EDC and the specifications. So what we find as part of this slide, we found that the city manuals were out of date, and didn't really mesh well together. As Sean said, it's been a long time since these have been updated, adopted in 1996, and then last updated in 2006. And so within the EDC, we reviewed not only the design criteria, but the standard specs, and including the construction drawings. But then, speaking to staff, internal changes were made to remedy some of the issues between the design standards and field construction, but nothing had been completed formally. So as part of the project, our effort combined the development of the GSI and the EDC review, develop an updated EDC, which is the next phase. And so this diagnostic report, we looked at adding the GSI to the EDC, providing an opportunity to align land development regulations and the use of a new GSI criteria as means of an incentive to, kind of design and development the city wants and to see, not only in the center city form-based code area, but throughout the city where possible. So this is our team. This is the folks that helped us put this together. This is our organizational chart that we provided when we started this project. And so our subject matter experts have reviewed EDC, the standard specs, construction drawings, and the development regulations. The review included current criteria and really how to incorporate and develop the GSI criteria. So within the slide, you can see Kim Potek there. She's one of our PEs. She's one example of the subject matter experts. Kim's got over 20 years of experience designing and implementing low impact development projects all over the southern United States. And then also within the subject matter experts, which Dawn couldn't be here tonight. She was busy doing something else, but she did the diagnostic review or led that review for us. Dawn's one of our urban planners. She's also been essential in conducting the stakeholder engagement elements of the process. And so she'll also be drafting the recommended amendments to the various development regulations down the road. So the FNI team worked closely with city staff throughout the process. Carrie and the staff formed an advisory committee to provide guidance during our review. And then the recommendations from city staff were essential as they use the EDC daily. Our review brought in additional ideas throughout the benchmarking, a comparison with industry standards, and our experience working with other communities. The external stakeholders, including engineers, developers, and community representatives, we engaged them early on at the kickoff meeting, received feedback on the current EDC, and to get documentation or to document their concerns with the use of low impact development. They were also provided a full draft of the diagnostic report for review before the last advisory committee review. Oops, sorry about that. So we've laid out the project in 3 different phases. Phase 1, which we've just completed, that's the diagnostic review and the benchmarking. And then phase 2, EDC and the specification updates. And then phase 3 is implementation. And so part of these phases, the first phase, the project approach, was simplified. We started at the beginning and we defined the issues. Within the first phase, as stated above, we developed the diagnostic review and benchmarking. Benchmarking allowed us to look at other cities and determine what the city of Norman staff likes and does not like regarding other communities' EDC documentation. Benchmarking also allowed us to discuss other communities and how they manage their EDC and their LID and the overall look and feel of the documents. So this slide depicts the phase 1 milestones. We kicked the project off in March in the midst of COVID, of course. That was always interesting, trying to get everybody together and figuring out how we were going to manage the project. FNI staff reviewed the documents prior to a kickoff meeting with the advisory committee. Then we held internal stakeholder interviews in May and followed up with a kickoff meeting with the development community in June. Green stormwater infrastructure followed in September once we had input from the stakeholders. FNI completed the first draft of the diagnostic report in September and continued modifications through October with the advisory committee. In December, we completed community benchmarking, the benchmarking portion, and finalized the diagnostic report in January after receiving comments from the advisory committee and the stakeholders. So what did we find when we went through everything? So there's a lack of consistency and guidance between the city documents departments and the process. As Sean said, it's been a while since they've been updated. So, you know, there's been code changes, there's been regulation changes. And so we found that the field staff and engineering staff were on the same page, but it wasn't really documented for the developers regarding the design. So everyone stated that the EDC should be user-friendly, making the document searchable and located in one location. And then also we found that the way things are submitted could be updated and streamlined. So for the green stormwater infrastructure, we discussed the best way to implement the low impact development by developing a new section for stormwater quality design. We also had to address design criteria for the infill development and the city center form-based code. As part of the design, how do we incentivize the use of a low impact development? So for the standard specifications, we also had the same issues as the EDC. They lack consistency and guidance and needed updated to match the state and federal requirements. Within the land development regulations, we found that the zoning code needed to be updated to address street classifications introduced in the city center form-based code. We also received comments concerning adding density to the neighborhoods without changing their character. Within the center city form-based code, addressing block length provisions and curb cut restrictions to support GSI was also needed. As mentioned above, the criteria must be added to the EDC for the new street classifications. So within the subdivision regulations, there were a few items that would help enable sustainable development and encourage compact walkable development patterns. This may be through addressing access management, to improve safety. And then with the GSI, how will these items be managed within the Properties Owners Association? Who will own and maintain them? Are there incentives? And then how does this impact in line with the water quality protection zone? So we were also asked about parking. We were asked, how do we maximize the existing spaces, and can parking waivers be considered? Can the city center form-based code be applied to citywide? Can we consider a maximum instead of a minimum? And how do we coordinate with GSI? So as part of this document within the diagnostic report, as part of this, we documented within the diagnostic report all of the comments. Of course, there's a lot to consider, as you can tell. So we're ready to start phase 2. We have completed the diagnostic report and a portion of the benchmarking. We're ready to develop and update the EDC specifications, construction drawings, and create the green stormwater infrastructure design criteria, along with developing recommendations for the incentives. Within this phase, we asked the stakeholders what they liked and disliked regarding EDC. Within the phase 1, we asked the stakeholders what they liked and disliked regarding EDC. Within phase 2, we're going to ask them to be intimately involved. As we develop the EDC and GSI, stakeholder subcommittees will be established to review each portion of the documents. Using the diagnostic report, each subcommittee will review new sections and provide comments. External and internal stakeholders will make up the subcommittees. Within the diagram, FNI will start the drafts of the technical documents and start feeding data to the advisory committee and the internal and external stakeholders. This will carry on for 9 months. During this time, Don, as I mentioned before, will provide a code review with the final reviews in months 10 through 12. The more involvement we have from the external stakeholders, the better. There were only 3 instances where during phase 1 for external stakeholder involvement. We want to triple that effort as we write the EDC and the new GSI sections. When completed, an updated cohesive EDC and GSI manual will help provide the city and the development community the tools they need that benefit both the city and the community. So what follows? Once the EDC is completed, as we discussed, phase 3 was developed for FNI to help with the implementation. This may include training resources, design guides, and other publications to inform and educate staff in the community. The final scope will need to be written for this and authorized per or after phase 2 is completed. So I'll be happy to take any questions or comments.
Councilmember Peacock.
Thanks for the presentation. Can you speak briefly about how stakeholders were contacted and or engaged in phase 1?
Yeah, sure. I think that as part of phase 1, what we did was the advisory group that we had reached out to a select group of course, internal and external stakeholders. They were by email and also by phone calls.
Okay, I got a lot of correspondence today, basically asking, why such and such wasn't included in the stakeholder provisions. I guess there's some trepidation out there that the business community and the developer community and the architect community they weren't consulted, and I just want to kind of address those concerns. And it sounds like phase 2 there's going to be a lot more engagement with those groups, but I wanted you to be able to speak to that briefly.
Let me take that one, Councilmember. At least, and Keith will have some other comments, I'm sure. We were seeing some of those emails today too, so I appreciate you bringing that up. What I sensed in some of that too was a misunderstanding about where we are in the process. I heard the reference to draft documents, council's gonna adopt something. None of that is the case. That's not what you're doing tonight, nor will you do that next Tuesday. We're a year away from even asking you to adopt anything. So I think what you said a moment ago is correct. We really, if council allows us to proceed to phase 2, the next 12 months is when we really get into the meat of this. And if you have someone that wants to be involved, send us their name. But they're going to have to be willing to put some time in. This is a heavy, heavy lift, and sitting around and reviewing technical specifications is not for everybody, as you know. I know that's the world you live in. So not everyone is going to want to sit down and review water pipeline standards and that sort of thing. So we're thinking that we're going to divide up into several groups, several little subcommittees, if you will. City of Oklahoma City did something like this a few years ago, and it's pretty effective. So one group might take on the green infrastructure. One group might take on street design. One group might take on ProAg and ADA regulations, and we think that might be the way to manage this. So we'll need lots of volunteers. So we will be seeking out lots of help from anyone who wants to be involved. The original group of 20 or so was made up of developers, engineers, architects, builders, that sort of thing. We thought it was a pretty good cross-sectional group, and we got some fair input, but frankly, we didn't get as much as we had hoped. And I think it's because they weren't sure how far to drill down. This diagnostic stage is a little bit 30,000 foot view, but they'll know what we're looking for in this next 12 months.
No, I appreciate that comment. I think, yeah, there's a real desire from people out there to have some public input on this. So yeah, thank you for letting me know that opportunity exists.
Now, I'll say this too for the council is that whenever a city undertakes a review of their design standards and construction standards, the city, the staff, and the council, I think, is generally looking at this as how can we improve? How can we get better? How can we make that street last longer? How can we make sure that those water lines don't break when the temperature drops like it did last week? Developers, I think, generally think about how can I build my public improvements as inexpensively as possible, because that's part of their business model. Those two things are conflicting sometimes. We want to spend more money, they want to spend less. It's the same dilemma that every city faces, and we have to find that compromise in the middle somewhere. There's never, where the city's not going to get everything we want, and the developers, I don't think, are going to get everything they want. That's usually the way it works out. It's a happy compromise in the middle. And I think we'll find that as we have for decades here, frankly. And every other city goes through this process too. It's kind of painful a little bit. I wish we could do it every 5 years, but it's difficult to undertake this sort of thing and on top of everything else that we're doing here. So I think, brace yourselves. There will be some disagreements and some conflict as we go through this, but our goal in Freeze and Nichols' goal is to help us to find that happy medium, that compromise that works for all affected parties.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think balance is the key on this. But looking and seeing these haven't been updated in 25 years or something, that's cause for concern in itself right there. So I appreciate the effort you guys putting into it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I'm really glad that you asked that question, Councilmember Peacock, because I also heard from some of the stakeholders today, and I just was curious too as to how many were there actual meetings held? Were those all stymied because of COVID? I mean, you mentioned that you had outreach by email, phone. Did this stakeholder group that's identified in here, did they actually meet, or how did that all happen?
Yeah, so there was 3 different instances that we met with the stakeholder group.
Okay.
One was a kickoff meeting. Another one was, I think it was in September. And then the documents were also sent out to them for review.
Okay, so this particular document was sent to all the stakeholders to
That
review?
is correct.
Okay, that's interesting, because I had one stakeholder say to me today that they did not have access to this. So maybe there was just some, technical issue. I don't know. So I was just curious if so when was this sent to all the stakeholders? Just recently?
No, there was 2 different times that they had the availability to review that document.
And there was an opportunity for feedback at those 2 different times?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay.
My recollection, Carrie can clarify, I thought it was late November, early December was the first request. And then as we got to the end of the year, we asked them again, because we frankly didn't get much feedback. We were a little disappointed in it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was sent out via email so that they could all review it. And we did ask for comments back. I will say COVID did complicate things. It made the meetings that we had planned a little bit more challenging.
Sure.
But we did hold we did have the in-person meeting, and then we communicated via email as we were working through how to maneuver through
Okay.
COVID. I would say a year on, we're a little bit better at all of this.
Yeah.
So the ability to have public input through COVID times will only improve from here.
Well, it's definitely been a work in progress, hasn't it? On figuring out that part out for sure. Yeah, I understand that. So it sounds like in phase 2, there are going to be more opportunities, not only for the initial stakeholders who are identified in this report, but there's also going to be an opportunity if other people at this point have an interest, they will be able to also participate. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's absolutely right, Councilmember. And
Okay.
again, we're still kind of sorting through it based on some of that input we're getting today, sorting through how we're going to seek those folks out. I know in the Oklahoma City model, there were certain folks who were particularly focused on water issues or sanitary sewer issues or street or green infrastructure or traffic. And so that's going to be part of our intent, is to try to get the folks in the room that really have an interest and preferably an expertise in that area.
Okay. Then the other piece of that was when you mentioned about internal and external stakeholders. So are those more subject specific stakeholder groups? Are those going to be a combination of internal and external stakeholders? Are you envisioning the external stakeholders as a separate type of entity?
Great question.
Well,
Keith, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that I think there's definitely a benefit by having them commingled, but then there's also that benefit of having them separate too. And so because those groups work together, and they may, hey, I don't want to say that because the city's in the room, and so there's definitely a benefit of separating those out. But again, we do see a large benefit of having certain meetings that they're together.
Okay.
I'll mention for the internal folks, again, these are folks who work with these manuals every day.
Yeah.
And so they are intimately familiar with not only the design criteria and the construction standards, but they're also familiar with what we build in Norman. And so they're reviewing it every day. They're intimately involved in this process, and they've already provided a lot of input to Freeze and Nichols. So a lot of the focus going forward is going to be on those external stakeholders.
Then the other thing I was curious about is the benchmarking piece, and you included a quite extensive chart of all of the different municipalities that you used as benchmarking. I was just curious as how you decided, which municipalities that you were interested in pursuing. How did that work?
So some of it's from our experience, and as we go to different seminars, et cetera, and then also our folks within house say, hey, I've seen this, or we did some of that research of how do we put together the GSI manual? How does this work with the EDC? And so some of the communities, yes, they're a lot larger than Norman, but they may have a certain way that they put together the EDC manual, either online or how they access it. So again, it's just a large list of, hey, here's all of the different cities that we're looking at, and it's more of a discussion piece at this point in time.
Okay, because it just seemed like a really extensive resource list to go back and check into. Because the other part of that is, I know as the city of Norman, we have peer and benchmark cities that we use frequently. And I was wondering, out of that whole resource list, were there some in there that we consider part of our peer and benchmark cities? Not sure who can answer that question.
I think, yes, there's, again, like Keith mentioned, is key there, that so much of the benchmarking that was done here was focused on the green infrastructure. And frankly, there aren't very many cities in the country that have adopted green infrastructure standards, truly adopted them. There's lots of cities that are trying to dabble in that field, but there's very few in the country that have those to look at and benchmark to. On the other hand, every city in the country has street standards and water and sewer. So as we go forward to phase 2, we'll begin to benchmark with more of those cities that you mentioned, Councilor, that we look at locally, regionally, certainly Oklahoma City, Moore, Tulsa, Broken Arrow, those kinds of cities, as well as the cities in the region. Kansas City Metro has some of the best design criteria and standard specifications in the country. So we're going to look at some of those agencies as well as we drill down into the actual rewriting of the standards.
Oh. Well, I also just want to say thank you, because this was really a quite comprehensive overview of lots of things that we've talked about on council for the last few years, and just as an interested resident. So there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and I am really looking forward to phase 2 and getting into it a little bit deeper, and hopefully having that robust community engagement with lots of different voices at the table, because not only are we covering the engineering design standards and certainly the green stormwater infrastructure, but literally you've already done some reviewing of Center City form-based code and some of the issues that are outstanding there, some of the zoning issues that also are little puzzles to be put together, and got the tree ordinance included. So there is a lot of content here. And so I'm really looking forward to the next phase. And my one last question, because I'm just not sure, when we talk about engineering design criteria and the manuals, we're using the term manuals as a plural. So under the EDC, are there multiple manuals that are a part of that? I mean, I'm just not sure I understand what we're referring to.
Well, with the EDC, there's really just one document, but there's multiple manuals within the city, and so we're trying to get all those put together into one. And so as we develop the GSI, that green stormwater infrastructure, placing that and putting them all together so they all make sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think that's going to be a welcome a welcome goal, especially for our city staff, to be able to have consistency across multiple documents that we use to guide us as we go, because I know that's the source of a lot of confusion sometimes. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, Mayor.
I have a quick question. We talked a lot about our green design criteria and then the first presentation on solar energy. Where are we at with the sustainability coordinator?
That position got put on hold, and I'm going to have to go back and look at my notes. I remember that conversation. I don't remember if we swapped that out for a position or if that was part of our hard hiring freeze pending the outcome of litigation. But I'll dig that back up first thing in the morning, and we'll figure out where we left off. I think we have the job description ready to go, but we did not pull the trigger on filling that position.
Because it would seem that the cost savings we're anticipating would pay for a position that will hopefully help us save other funds and be a greener city. So
Very
so I'm optimistic about that. It'd be nice if it was already in place to help with this process, but I understand how that works, and I appreciate staff being very green-minded as we look to the future of our community. If there are no other questions or comments, that is it for tonight. Thank you all for the presentations. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.